with us. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm glad you're here. My name's Laura, and just in case you didn't know, I spent a lot of time working with the kids over the years, so I learned a lot of these Unity lessons, and I wanted to share one of them with you today. It's interesting that it was so foggy this morning. And I don't know if you remember a few weeks ago, we were talking about our inner sanctuary and how we have, in my mind, the way I work it, we have all these different rooms with the different 12 powers. And I said that the room of understanding is filled with fog, in my mind, the way I think of it. And when I go in that room and I sit quietly, the fog lifts. It's like going in a bathroom and wiping the mirror. All of a sudden, everything comes into focus and it's clearer. So I saw the fog today, and it's like, whoa, understanding. Yes, that's great. I hope everything comes into focus, and that you're gonna get this message, because it's a great message to have today. We talked about prayer the last few weeks and helping others, and this week we're going to talk about Jesus and a little bit about his humanness and his spirituality. So we're going to go in both directions here. First, let me read the Bible verse. This is the Garden of Gethsemane, and I hope I'm saying it right, because it's kind of a weird word, but Gethsemane. And this is from Matthew chapter 26. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go yonder and pray." And taking with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, that would be James and John, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and keep awake with me." And going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt." And he came to the disciples, and he found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So you could not keep awake with me for 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again, for the second time, he went away and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, thy will be done." And again he came back and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. And then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." This message has a lot of stuff to talk about, so hopefully you'll stick with me on it. First, let's talk about the whole garden concept. Think of your garden. I'm sure many of you have gardens or will have gardens. And when you go in the garden, it's usually a peaceful feeling. So Jesus is going into the garden to pray. But what else happens in your garden? You plant seeds. The seeds die. The seeds are transformed into something greater. And the beauty of that garden is even better than that seed. So that's just something to just mull around as we go through this story and as we go through the next few weeks of the Easter season, that garden is very symbolic of Jesus' story and our story of planting the seeds and being transformed. Jesus in this story is showing his humanness. He's showing his vulnerability. He's saying, "My Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. I don't want to do this." He knows that he's going to be arrested. He knows he's going to have this terrible trial and tribulation. And he's like, "Take this cup from me. I don't want to do this. Why can't you just let me go around and heal people and raise them from the dead and be a teacher? Why do I have to go through this?" Why does everybody hate me? Why are they betraying me? Why are they lying to me? What's going on? I don't get it. Take this away from me. He's really struggling. In fact, the words here, and I'm going to just be a little dramatic here. He says, and going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me." Okay, let's watch this, okay? That's dramatic. How many of you have ever fallen on your face in fear and doubt and worry and just said, "Take this cup from me"? So that's his human side. I can't do this. I'm overwhelmed. I can't do it one more day. And then the spiritual side kicks in and says, "But thy will be done. Your will, God. Whatever you want, I'll do." So he's got his human side and he has his spiritual side. Two points on this. First, it's important to think about Jesus is just like us in so many ways, the human side of him. And he's going through this challenge, and sometimes those of us in Unity tend to get a little, do what Reverend Brenda often calls spiritual malpractice. And that's when we start thinking that our thoughts have brought this on. What did I do to bring this trouble to me? What did I do? Was I thinking wrong? Was I doing something wrong? Why did I draw this horrible thing to me? And I want you to think about that. Jesus is our great teacher. Did he do anything to bring that horrible stuff to him? He's Mr. Spirituality. He's the one. He's going off and praying. He's praying. He's healing. He's teaching. He is the Mr. Spirituality, the one teacher all of us have. Not the only one. There's a lot of spiritual teachers out there, but Jesus was amazing for us. He's a perfect example of perfection. And yet here, he has this trouble. And he has this tribulation that he's going through. He didn't bring it on himself, but he has to go through it. Or as Eric Butterworth would say, he has to grow through it. Butterworth is great. I love him. I could read him every day and find something new. But he says many times we will go through something and go through it and go through it until we grow through it. There's usually something greater that we need to accomplish when we're having these trials, these tough times. So don't be discouraged when you're going through tough times. Don't do spiritual malpractice thinking, "Oh yeah, I brought this on myself. I'm a horrible person, and everybody's being mean to me, and it's all me." And it's like, no. This is a process. This is something that your soul needs to go through to be better, to be more whole, to be more perfect. So allow yourself to go through it and use Jesus as your teacher. He's showing us how to do it. So he has his vulnerable side, his human side, and then he's saying, "Not my will, but thy will," God's will. So what is God's will? Is God up there saying, "No, here's what you're supposed to do, and I'm going to tell you how to do it"? God's will is always good. And from Charles Fillmore, one of the Unity founders, says the will of God, God's will is always perfection and good for all God's children. God does not will suffering or imperfection in any form. And from another metaphysics book that we have is, God is only absolute good. The will of God is that each person expresses as much good and the Christ nature that he or she possibly can on the level of consciousness at which he or she may be operating. As such, there is not a specific plan for each individual. God's will for us is only good. And again, thinking like the kids do, when you're a kid, you're drawing a picture and you want to draw a picture of your house. And so you get your colors out. I'm thinking, like watercolors. And you get your colors out and the first thing you do is draw the ground. And then you put your house and then your trees and whatever else. But you have that foundation. And in unity, that foundation is good. God's will for us is only good. And sometimes we go out in the far country and we forget about our good. But that good is always there. Again, back to Butterworth. He says it's in some ways it's like gravity. Do you sit in your chair, do you pray and say, please, gravity, keep me in my chair today? Please, gravity, don't let my ice cream cone float away. Please, gravity, stick with me. No, you don't have to do that. Gravity is. Gravity is a law. And just like God's will is law, good is law, God's will of good. So you always have that there. It's your foundation. There is only one presence, one power, God, the good. We say that every Sunday. Do you remember that? Do you think about that? Our only purpose is good. Okay, so we have that. Jesus is jumping back and forth between his human nature and his spiritual nature. But let's talk about who he brought with him. First of all the disciples are there, and then he takes 3 with him to go off yonder and pray. He takes Peter, James, and John. Charles Fillmore described for us these 12 powers, these 12 gifts, and you've heard a lot about them over the years. That they're faith, imagination, love, life, order, power, strength, wisdom, will, understanding, zeal. All those. There's at least 12, and then I'm sure there's more if you want more. Sometimes I struggle with. There's always good. You always have so much good to choose from. What you name it doesn't matter. I struggle with Fillmore sometimes. Sometimes I think he's a little arbitrary, and I fight with him. It's like, and we all do. We're all on our own spiritual journey. What works for me may not work for you. In fact, only like 33% of the world population are Christians. The other 67% are something else. So we're all on our own path. So whether you agree with Fillmore or you don't, or whether you agree with these tools to help us rise above our troubles, use what works for you. And this tool that Fillmore has is he assigned these 12, he has these 12 powers, and he assigned different disciples to each power. And the power, Peter is assigned the power of faith. James is assigned the power of wisdom. And John is assigned the power of love. So if you take that to another step into our story, so Jesus is going off to pray, and he's bringing faith, he's bringing wisdom, and he's bringing love. All the other guys are still there, just like we have this foundation of good. All those other powers are still there. But these 3 in particular, he brings with him. And he goes off to pray. And he prays for a while, and he comes back, and the disciples are asleep. They failed him. And Jesus says to Peter, so you could not keep awake with me 1 hour? He's saying, faith, can't you stay with me for 1 hour? Think of it, when you put those powers to it, it has a whole different meaning. It's not the people that he's disappointed in. It's not Peter, James, and John. You guys failed me. You're not my friends anymore. It's all about Jesus, and his faith is failing him. He's going through this rough time, and he's saying, God, take this from me. I can't deal with it. I'm overwhelmed. This is too hard. He's forgetting about his faith. It's still there. It just fell asleep. And James, wisdom. Wisdom, and in my little toolbook, in my little room, is the instruction manual. Capital I, capital M, the instruction manual. Wisdom is knowing what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And wisdom fell asleep when Jesus was out praying. He didn't know what to do. He's like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to do this. I don't want to go through this. So he goes back and prays, and he comes back again, and all three of them were asleep. Love was asleep too. When you think of love, I like these visuals. I think of the prayer for protection, Jim Freeman's poem. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. So when you feel loved, you feel enfolded and supported and loved, and like you're not alone. So Jesus is in the garden, and love falls asleep. He's not feeling enfolded. He's feeling really alone. He's feeling like, I'm doing this all by myself. So here's the interesting thing. If you take this story, so he goes off and prays, and while he's off praying, these guys are falling asleep. Faith, wisdom, love. They're all falling asleep. But he comes back, and he wakes them up. And he says, keep awake so that you may not enter in temptation. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. So he knows these powers, these gifts, faith, wisdom, love, they are all there. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So he wakes them up, he goes back to pray, he comes back, and they're asleep again. And it goes again and again. Three times. And how many times does that work for us? You know, when we're going through a tough time, is our faith strong all the time? Are we saying, yes, good is here, God's will, there is good, God is in the midst of this? Are we saying that? Maybe not. Maybe we're getting off into that fear and the doubt and the worry and the feeling of being overwhelmed. How do I do this? I don't know what to do. Wisdom is sleeping, because that instruction manual is your guide. You know, if you go to your wisdom, you will know what to do. If you hang around with your faith, you know that good is underneath all. And you know that you're enfolded in love. So we have all these, Jesus going back and forth between his human side and his spiritual side. Thy will be done. There's one more disciple, and I just want to touch on it a little bit. At the end of the story, this part of the story, after comes back the third time, he says, are you still sleeping? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise and let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. Now, if you know the Easter story, you know who the betrayer is. That's Judas. And we'll talk a little bit more about this next week, but I just want you to think about Judas this week, because I was thinking, okay, so if Peter is faith and James is wisdom, John is love, what power is Judas? Because Judas is the bad guy, and yet he's assigned a power that we have. So what power is that? And I had to go look it up, because we always just push Judas away. And I went and looked it up, and we've done it in our little hour of power thing, or half hour of power. Judas's power is life. And I saw that and I gasped, because what is the Easter story all about? It's about Jesus giving his life and us being transformed. So I want you to hold on to that, because Judas may not be the bad guy in the sense that, in the bigger picture. Okay, so we'll think about that. Let's just take a minute and be still. A couple of weeks ago, I used the thing, pretend that you're your phone and just plug in. Let your chair be your charger. Plug in and just allow yourself to be filled with energy. You don't have to ask questions. You don't have to talk to your apps. You just have to sit there and let the energy fill you up. We're on our own journey, each of us. And we have our tough times that we go through. But we carry with us God's will, which is only good. And that's the foundation. Sometimes we get away from it, but God's good is always there. And we use our spiritual gifts to remind us of that. They're always there. Let's go to our garden in our mind. We're grateful for the peace of that garden. I thought of the Bette Midler song with the words that are, just remember in the winter, far beneath the winter snow, lies the seed that with the sun's love in the spring becomes the rose. It looks pretty rough right now in our garden, in Jesus' garden. But far beneath the winter snow lies the seed, lies transformation, new growth, new life. We may have our crucifixions, but Jesus showed us in his humanity and his perseverance to keep coming back. Thy will be done. Good is in the midst of us. God is in the midst of us. We embrace our faith. We embrace our wisdom. That instruction manual. We know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. We embrace our inner faculty of love, knowing we are never alone. We are enfolded in love. And this love is so much greater than our fear or our doubt or our worry. We nurture this life within us, this transformation, knowing, having faith in the resurrection, the new life to come. And we are grateful, grateful. For this knowledge, this knowing, and these many gifts. And so it is. Amen.